We'd like to start today with our keynote speech. I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard Gerver first. He's the opening speaker of the day. He has enunciated and has mesmerized audiences all over the world. His complex methodologies are translated into simple English, and he talks of prep with personal anecdotes. In 2005, he won the prestigious School Head of the Year award at the British National Teaching Awards for his work in leading a school on the brink of closure to becoming one of the most innovative in the world. Today, he shall talk about creating tomorrow's schools today. I need not say much. I'm sure he'll mesmerize you with his own knowledge and words. I invite over here Richard Gerver.
It's an absolute privilege to be here. What an introduction. No pressure now, really. What an extraordinary experience I've had over the last 24 hours. I have to say the hospitality last night, wasn't last night the most wonderful evening? Wasn't it extraordinary? And you know, what really struck me about last night were the long service awards. Those awards given to the people in this room who have given the best part of their adult lives to the children of Pakistan. And what remarkable people you are. What I've felt in the short time that I've been here, and I only arrived yesterday, is what marks Beaconhouse out as special. Forget all of the incredible achievements in terms of the scaling and job that you've done in creating an education system. Is from the minute I arrived yesterday lunchtime, the one thing I feel from the delegates at this conference that I felt through yesterday afternoon and certainly felt last night is your absolute passion for the children you teach. And I'm not sure if you realize that sadly that's rare in this day and age, because we live in an education system and a world that is so ordered and so much about systems and so much about outcomes that it strikes me that in a lot of the countries I visit and a lot of the teachers I talk to around the world today, the passion that was there when they first went into the profession, when they first chose to become teachers, has been submerged under layers of concrete, because actually what they've been required to focus on is academic outcomes and performance and policy and strategy. And it's why, for me, that last night and yesterday's experience of spending time with you and meeting you marked out what you do here as so incredibly important. You see, the picture you see there on the slides, that was the school that I was privileged enough to take over as head teacher in 2001. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about my school, but I'll talk about the principles and theories that I learned during my time there as a principal. But the reason I show you that picture is because, beautiful building though it is, it's a typical British school, built many, many years ago, built on a paradigm and a system and belief of education that was created well over 100 years ago. And one of the things that I find interesting about education in its basest form, despite the incredible innovation, the extraordinary learned people that have tried to change the system, that have reasoned that there are different approaches to the way we should teach our children, one of the things that strikes me about most education systems around the world is that they've never really changed. You see what I mean? That we've lived in this world where we know more than we've ever known before. We know more about the brain and how it works. We know more about the psychology of learning and education than ever we have. We know, and partly what I'm going to talk about with you in my time this morning, is how fast and how far the world has changed. In the last 20, 30, 40, 50, in the last 6 months, the world's changing at an exponential rate. Despite all of that, it strikes me that education has really not changed at all. For example, we still teach the same subjects we taught 100 years ago, don't we? We still have the same hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? That certain subjects are considered more important than others. I'll tell you a little story about that in a little while. We still teach to a timetable that hasn't really changed in 100 years. We still sit children behind rows of desks in classrooms that look identical to the way they looked 100 years ago. I often say to people that if we had a time machine and we brought somebody back from 100 years ago and we made them stand in a high street, they'd be terrified by what they saw. Mobile phones, new technologies, cars, all of the things that we've seen. But if you put that same person in a classroom, they'd sit there and go, I recognize this. And I think that's a really scary thought. So anyway, here I am in 2001 taking on a school that the British government had written off. The British government had said this school could not be saved. And actually, they were on the verge of closing it. And I walked in. And I walked in with a mixture of arrogance. I truly believed that my philosophy about education was right. And equally worryingly, ignorance, because I was young enough not to realize what could happen to me if I got it wrong. So I walked into this school and took over this remarkable place filled with remarkable people. And people often ask me, so what was the reason for this school not succeeding? And I actually think it was just an intense version of the reason why so many teachers will feel so aggrieved, so aggravated, so frustrated so much of their times and their careers. Because actually, the problem with this school wasn't the children and it wasn't the teachers. It was the fact that they all felt a total lack of empowerment. What I mean is the teachers who were passionate professional people had been given systems and structures to implement, many of which didn't feel came from here for them as professionals, many of which were not based on their instincts and understandings of what it was their students needed. And secondly, and maybe more importantly, because the school was delivering systems and structures without heart and passion, and therefore the staff themselves didn't feel empowered, the most important thing for me was that when I walked round the halls and through the classrooms, it was the children who felt no sense of empowerment. And what I mean by that is that we know that children aren't stupid, don't we? We patronize children as a danger because actually they're incredibly insightful, intelligent people. They are human beings the same as the rest of us. And they know when something's happening that isn't from here. They know when there's a teacher stood in front of them who isn't delivering learning that really matters. And the point about this school, the reason it was failing, was because the children themselves felt that they had no interaction. They had no level of involvement in their own learning journey. And of course, it's human nature, isn't it? That if we feel disconnected as adults, if we feel that we don't have active involvement in something, the first reaction is anger and often withdrawal and resentment. And that was happening in this school. And it was happening, I think, because, as you'll all know, the British education system, sadly, but I don't think it's just the British education system, I think many education systems around the world actually, have become obsessed with formal outcomes, test and exam results. And that was happening in this school, you see, because as a school gets worse and its exam results drop, the default setting is to make the school concentrate more on its outcomes and its exam results. Because, of course, that's how we're measured, isn't it? So the thing is, if the exam results are low, the pressure is on you to intensify the preparation to improve those results. And that was happening in this school. And I want to tell you a very personal story, if I may, about what I think is the critical danger of education around the world. Really summed up in a very personal story. Just after I took over at the school, I did what a lot of new principals do when they take on a post in a school. I spent a week just walking around my school, sitting in on lessons, trying to understand the capacity of the teachers and the people I was working with, trying to get to grips with the potential of the children. And I have to say that for the best part of the week, as I walked around the school, I became increasingly concerned because there was this feeling that everybody was dead behind the eyes. that it was almost an automated system where people were just delivering systems and strategies. And I remember actually getting towards the end of the week, you know when you're having a bad time and pressure builds in your life, you kind of handle it and handle it and handle it. And then at some point a catalyst, something occurs in your life that just makes you break. And for me, I was driving home late one night after a day at school on the Thursday. It was about 11:30 in the evening. And I was caught speeding. I know I shouldn't have been doing it, but I was caught speeding. And the thing is, I just burst into tears because the pressure of everything I'd been feeling through the week sort of culminated. And I just became intensely upset, and this outpouring of the realization of the scale of the job ahead of me hit me. And I went in on the Friday morning feeling really down, really sad. And I went into the final class I had to go and visit, was the classroom of a classroom of 9-year-old children. And the teacher was a young woman who'd been teaching maybe 2 or 3 years. And I went into her classroom before the children arrived so that she could talk me through what she was going to be doing with the children during the day. And the minute I walked into the room, I instantly was lifted. Now, I'm sure you'll all know what I mean by this when I say the vast majority of our profession are dedicated, committed, talented people. But every so often, and I'm sure this has happened to many, in fact, there will be many of you in this room, every so often, you meet a teacher who is truly special. And what I mean by that is they have a quality that you can't teach other teachers to possess. They have an extraordinary ability just to naturally communicate and empathize with the students in their care. They create magical environments. Do you know what I mean? Classrooms where you walk in and it's like gold's dripping from the ceiling. The room is such a magical space. I call them the magic weavers. These people that just create irresistible